What's up, fight fans? It's your boy Terry L. I'm coming at y'all again with another one. Um, Boxing Forum, coming to y'all with some new, fresh news. But today I'm gonna do a little something different today. I'm gonna go at y'all still here in the island of Mauritius, chilling, taking in some sun, a much needed break. But I'm still here giving y'all some boxing news and some boxing reminiscence. Today I'm going to do a little something different. Today I'm going to actually do a recap of all the boxing fights, the major boxing fights of the year of 2021, and just go over some of the big fights to give you a recap. Just kind of go down memory lane so we can look back at some of the big fights and the big moments of this year. It was a brilliant year for boxing, one of the best years of boxing that I can remember in a long time. From top to bottom, we had some really good fights. And every month they had a fight that had you wanted to tune in and watch and see what was going on for various reasons. Um, yeah, the boxing world, I want to say congratulations to all the box promoters who worked very hard behind the scenes, even during this pandemic, to put on some really good fights, to put on some good fights for the fans and for the fighters. Um, uh, some of us were on lockdown in various parts of the world, as you remember back in January of this year here, especially in London, where I reside. We were on lockdown from January to February. Sorry, from January to April, and there was quite a few fights that went on behind the scenes or behind closed doors. But so if I don't mention some of the fights that you may remember, don't feel offended, fight fans or fighters alike. I'm just going to go over some of the top fights that I can recall and that I've made notes from. So I'm going to read from my notepad to talk about some of the great fights or the top fights, the most exciting fights of the year 2021. So here we go from top to bottom. So we're going to start with January, early January 2021. The big one was Ryan Garcia, King Ryan versus Luke Campbell. That was for the WBC lightweight eliminator. And there was a seventh round TKO stoppage. Great body shot by Ryan Garcia, stopping Luke Campbell in that fight in the U.S. Um, there was another sort of fight going on. Most people thought it was uneventful, a bit boring, but it was Caleb Plant beating Caleb Trudeau for the unanimous decision for the IBF super middleweight title. And Caleb Plant just doing what Caleb Plant always does. He just boxes, looks good, good performer, classy boxer, and he won that fight in sensational fashion. But a lot of people say it wasn't really that exciting. But I like watching Caleb Plant. I think he's a good fighter, and that set him up for a mega showdown later on in the year, as we know, with Canelo Alvarez, the man of boxing right now. But we'll get that later on. In February was a bit quiet. We had Mauricio Lara, TKO Josh Warrington, a fighter I like watching. But unfortunately, Josh Warrington fell up short, came up short that fight, was TKO'd. An exciting fight. I did watch this fight. I thought it was pretty exciting. It was David Avanesyan when he beat, he KO'd Josh Taylor in the sixth round, that fight. That was in London. But the big one was obviously because he's a big name in the sport. He's a man of boxing, Canelo Alvarez. He retired Yildirim for the WBA and WBC super middleweight title. Now, the reason why this fight was a big fight in some respects was because this was Canelo Alvarez's big fight or first fight as a free agent. Because as you know, he left his zone for contentious reasons, and he also left Golden Boy Promotions. So this was his first fight technically as a free agent, although it was under the fight was shown on the zone. So if you had the DAZN app, you saw the fight. So it was a nothing fight. It was a fourth round stoppage where he retired Yildirim. Didn't even come out on the fourth. I think after the fourth round. But nonetheless, it was Canelo making a statement as a free agent. So that was pretty interesting. The month of March, it kind of picked back up again. As you know, as I said before, King Ryan set the year off right with the seventh round TKO stoppage of Luke Campbell. But in March, it picked back up. We had the GOAT, female GOAT, Clarissa Shields. She was doing the usual. She unanimous decision against Evie Decare, the Canadian, for the undisputed middleweight crown, WBA, WBC, IBF, and WBO. Claressa just doing what Claressa does. Very exciting fighter. Has helped put female fighters on the map, or female boxer on the map. To me, a contention on the fights of the year. If you haven't watched it, I would suggest you do watch this fight between Juan Estrada versus Roman Gonzalez. It was a split decision, went in favor of Juan Estrada. I'd like to see him do it again if they do a rematch in 2022. That was for the WBA, WBC super flyweight title. This next opponent, Lawrence Okolie, next fighter, Lawrence Okolie, TKO'd Glowacki in the 6th round for the WBO cruiserweight title. Now, I did in a previous video, if you go back and watch that one, I predicted that Okolie would look pretty good against Glowacki. I predicted a middle round or late round, between round 6 and 8, round stoppage. If I remember correctly, I did predict around between round 6 to 8 against Glowacki. Although Glowacki had fought against the likes of Usyk, I do believe that that was probably the best Glowacki. But nonetheless, Lawrence Okolie did what he had to do. So that was a great fight for Okolie, and finally becoming a world champion. Also in the month of March, we saw Dillian Whyte versus Povetkin 2. And Dillian Whyte avenged his loss, or his previous fight loss in 2020 against Povetkin, when Povetkin sensationally knocked him out. And in this case, he 6-round stoppage for the WBC interim and diamond belt. So congrats to Dillian Whyte, who hopefully has set himself up for a big fight against Tyson Fury, which we'll talk about that in a little later on. So that was the month of March, and things heated up. Now, in the month of April, things kind of heated up again. Big month in the month of April, a big month of boxing. We had Conor Benn, did very well against Samuel Vargas, 1st-round knockout for WBC Continental Welterweight strap. Demetrius Andrade did his usual, beating Liam Williams, unanimous decision for the WBO middleweight strap. Savannah Marshall did well. She became a WBO middleweight title holder, beating Maria Lindbergh of the UK. But the big one was obviously true champion Carl Frampton bowing out in boxing, retiring from the sport of boxing after his 6-round TKO loss to Jamel Herring. And that was for the WBO super featherweight championship. Although it didn't go Carl Frampton's way, probably was a big order for him to go out on a high, but he wanted to go out on his gum shield, true champion, and he retired after that loss. But salute to the king, because he made Ireland proud, a really, really good fighter. I really enjoy watching his fights. Monster May, as I call it, Monster May had some uneventful fights, but it had Andy Ruiz Jr. stepping out under the shadows of Eddie Reynoso. Unanimous decision against Chris Arreola. Wasn't very impressed with that, but I wanted to see what Andy Ruiz Jr. looked like coming to this fight, because this was under a new tutelage, new training camp, and we know what Eddie Reynoso does to his fighters. Now having King Ryan, Ryan Garcia, as well as Canelo Alvarez. So the stable over there is looking pretty healthy. But yeah, Ruiz Jr. did what he had to do. It was for a non-title fight at heavyweight, but he won. He took care of his business. Chris Eubanks Jr., another uneventful fight, but once again stepping out, boxing under a new promotional stable, beating unknown Marcus Morrison. That was for middleweight, at middleweight. Did what he had to do. Another GOAT, in my opinion, Katie Taylor, although she's fighting a different weight class to Claressa Shields. She defeated Natasha Jonas. Another one was keeping boxing for female on the map. And as you know, I recently interviewed Hannah Rankin, who's also a title holder. Katie Taylor won the WBA, IBF, WBC, and WBO lightweight strap. We also saw Joseph Parker versus Derek Chisora, the first fight. That was a split decision win for Joseph Parker. Some people feel that Joseph Parker actually was very fortunate. I actually watched that fight and I thought that the judges had it right. I think Parker did just enough to win that fight. And I think even though Chisora was very brave and he has a lot of bravado, to me, he just doesn't do enough to win fights like that. But yeah, nonetheless, it was a good fight, entertaining fight. A contention for fight of the year, in my opinion, was the Josh Taylor unanimous decision win over Jose Ramirez, a fight that I really want to look forward to watching. That was for the unification at light welterweight for WO, WA, WC, and IBF straps. And that was Josh Taylor's night for the brilliant fight. Had a great game plan. And congrats, Josh Taylor. And I think he, once he defends successfully his title defense in February of 2022, I believe it's up in Scotland, then there's a chance that he may fight. There's talk of him fighting moving at 147, and that'd be very interesting because there's a lot of buzz around Josh Taylor. But the big fight of May, Monster May, was the Canelo Alvarez versus Billy Joe Saunders fight. I kind of wanted Saunders to win that fight, or at least maybe have a good account of himself, but there's no substitute for greatness. And Saunders was retired in the 8th round in that super middleweight unification fight. And yeah, I mean, Canelo just doing what Canelo always does. Hell of a fighter, hell of a champion. And that set him up for the mega fight that followed after that fight when he fought Caleb Plant, which we'll talk about a little later on. June was a bit quiet. It was a comeback fight for Daniel Dubois. As we know, in 2020, Daniel Dubois suffered a orbital eye socket injury, which could have been career-ending, life-threatening. It was an injury. I remember Michael Ogogo retired from boxing. As you know, Michael Ogogo was a silver medalist at heavyweight. No, not sorry, heavyweight. At I believe was it super middle. And no, I'm sorry. What am I talking about? Ogogo wasn't at super middle. What am I talking about? Ogogo was fighting at that stage. He may have been fighting super middle or light heavy. But Ogogo retired from boxing because that eye socket injury. And I remember Daniel Dubois, when he lost that fight against Joe Joyce, people criticized him, saying that he gave up. And Michael Ogogo was one of the few fighters that came to his defense. So this coming out fight against an unknown Bogdan Dinu, doesn't really matter who he was fighting, but it was his way of coming back after that really serious eye injury. He had to have surgery. But a second round KO win for him, so I was very happy to see Daniel Dubois come back and win that fight. But another fighter I do like watching. He's a Japanese superstar, Inoue. Inoue third round KO victory over Michael Dasmariñas. If you haven't seen Inoue fight, he's a 3-weight world champion. Started out at flyweight, then he moved it to super flyweight, and now he's a champion at bantamweight. WA and IBF bantamweight fighter. Very exciting fighter. At that weight class, he does what those fighters normally do: throw punches and bunches, million combinations, and he's just a very exciting fighter to watch. So he made it June. Bit quiet in June. July, we had some controversy. I call it July controversy. If you haven't seen the Jermell Charlo fight when he fought Brian Castano, it's worth watching. It was a very entertaining fight. Also a contender for fight of the year for the unified super welterweight division at 154. That was a draw. I watched that fight twice, and I actually thought the judges had it just right. The thing about Jermell Charlo that gets me is that when he lost to Harrison in his first loss, the first thing he said was the judges got it wrong, blame the judges. Okay, then he fought Harrison in the second fight, in the rematch, and he convincingly won that fight. He said, I'm not leaving it to the judges, and he took care of business had a late stoppage in that fight against Harrison. This fight was a draw. First thing he screams is judges, judges, judges. But he's critical of the judges more than he is of himself in terms of his performance. Now, Jermell Charlo is a hard banging 154. He throws combinations, he throws hard combinations, hard punches, bad intentions. But it's almost as if when the plan A doesn't work and a bit of plan B doesn't work, then he's stuck. And he relies his resilience, his punch resistance, his punch resilience, and his stamina. He's in the Charlo brothers are in mint condition. And it's almost as if he loses a fight, or in this case, he drew this fight, then the judges are always at fault. And so that's the one criticism I have of him, is that the great fighters know how to make the adjustments and say, okay, look, it wasn't my night. I got the draw, I got the L, I'm gonna come back stronger. And that's his biggest thing for me, that I'm a bit turned off by him a little bit. His brother doesn't really do that, but his brother's never lost. But brother was a top performer and is the better fighter of the two, Jermall Charlo. But yeah, it's worth watching that fight, just in case you want to have an opinion of that fight. So yeah, that controversial draw for some, to me, I thought was the right decision by the judges. I did enjoy watching Joe Joyce defeat Carlos Takam, a 6-round TKO loss, win for him, for Joe Joyce. Now that he's broken his hand, I believe he has a hand injury. He's out for a while. And I'm a little bit worried for the guy because he's a hard banging heavyweight. And he's getting old in the game for a heavyweight. He's still in his prime-ish, but he's like 34, 33, 34. And he doesn't have many fights under his belt as a pro to be that at that age he is now. And now an injury of this sort could put him out until maybe April, May of this year. The only good thing is that we're still in the pandemic, so we may go back to a mini lockdown and some live shows being behind closed doors without the crowds. That may be in his favor, but he kind of needs to get a move on if he wants to get either a big money fight or a title shot, because, you know, as he gets older, you kind of don't want to see fighters like him head and always be in the peripheral of the big fights and the big name fighters, when someone of his caliber should be in there or thereabouts. So that's my concern for Joe Joyce. So I hope he has a speedy recovery. And that was pretty much it for July. August was a solid performance. Solid performance with Joshua Buatsi fighting Rikats Bolatniks, who had 11th round TKO win. I'm very excited about this fighter because he's fighting under Virgil Hunter, a trainer who I really admire. I think it was a great move. If you look at some of my previous videos, I did mention that it was a great move by Buatsi to go under Virgil Hunter, because it could be a good move for him to be centered under the world stage for world title fights at light heavy. I do believe he's the best light heavy out of England. Between him and Anthony Yarde, I think the best two light heavyweights, especially in the UK, and definitely in the world. Obviously, Yarde has a big fight coming up, seeing who wins between with Joe Smith Jr. and Callum Johnson, which we'll talk about a little later on. Kid Galahad, I like this fighter. He beat James Dickens in 11th round TKO. As we know, I didn't mention Kid Galahad later on in this segment, but he did lose in November of this year. He lost his title fight to Kiko Martinez in a brilliant fight. But although he lost TKO performance, actually they counted as a KO knockout loss. Kiko Martinez, I was very happy for Kiko Martinez because he's a veteran. Was overlooked for a lot of fights in the past. Didn't get some decisions going his way, which is a bit unfortunate in the sport of boxing. But he avenged or revitalized his career by this massive win over a young up-and-coming star. So that was a big win for Kiko Martinez. And I just hope Kid Galahad can come back from that. Maybe get a rematch, wins the rematch. But let's see what 2022 holds for him. Then the big one in the month of August was Ugas beating Pacquiao. I thought it was a brilliant performance by Ugas, solid performance by the Cuban American. Um, to me, Pacquiao's had it. He's been out of it for the last 2 3 years, in my opinion. I said it even when he beat Keith Thurman. He must have bought that performance from the gods, because outside of that performance by Keith Thurman, Pacquiao should be sitting his ass down somewhere. But don't be surprised in 2022, someone throws a ton of money at him, and he takes it because he's still a good draw for an up and coming welterweight who wants to make a name for himself. And you know, he's a man of the Philippines. So if someone throws 25, 30 million at him, he could probably feed half a Philippine for that money. So he may just take that fight and whatever money's thrown at him. So I hope he sits down, because he's been a great champion and a very, very great servant for the sport of boxing. But yeah, congrats to Ugas. And if Ugas does fight Errol Spence Jr. next year, that'll be a good fight. And I hope he has a good account of himself and really pushes Errol Spence Jr., although I do expect Errol Spence Jr. to win that fight. I call it sick September, because September was a sick month for the sport of boxing. We had some really good fights. Not many fights, but we had some good fights. But the big ones, Lawrence Okolie retained his WBO cruiserweight type belt with third round KO win over Prasovic. Actually, it was a very pitiful fight by Prasovic, because he was probably one of the worst opponents for a title fight that was supposed to be a mandatory that I've ever seen in my life. He didn't even show up. But nonetheless, Okolie was in great shape and did what he had to do. So I was really happy for him. Once again, another GOAT in my eyes, Katie Taylor did what she had to do. She unanimous decision over Jennifer Hahn for the unified lightweight belt. To me, Katie Taylor and Clarissa Shields are doing their thing for the female, for the sport of boxing, for the ladies, and keeping female boxers on the map. So that was great to see. But yeah, the big one was Usyk versus AJ, and Usyk had a brilliant performance, great game plan, and for the WBA, IBF, WBC belt. WBO, IBF, and WBA belt. And yeah, let's see what the rematch holds for those two fights next year. So that was the month of September. In October was a great month for me. I like watching this month. October was a month that I'll always look back at with fondness, because a fighter that I really like watching is a guy named Shakur Stevenson. He had a 10th round KO victory over Jamel Herring for the WBO junior lightweight strap. As you know, Jamal Herring, as I mentioned earlier, beat Carl Frampton and retired Carl Frampton. So this was a really big fight for Shakur Stevenson against a very solid performer and a veteran in the sport of boxing. And it was a mature performance by Shakur Stevenson. He's one to watch out for. Even though he's at junior lightweight, I think when he goes up to lightweight, all those guys in that lightweight division are going to go up. Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia, whoever's in there. They're not going to stick around for this kid, because this kid is dangerous. And I think he's although he's maturing in his body and he's filling out, I think when he gets to lightweight, he's going to be another champion. He's going to be another star of the sport of boxing. Sandor Martin, congrats to Sandor Martin, who defeated Mikey Garcia. That was a light welterweight at 140 fight. It was a majority decision for Sandor Martin. I think it was the right decision. Some of you actually disagree with me when I did a podcast on that one, and I thought Sandor Martin won that fight. But yeah, I think it was a great decision by the judges. He did just enough to win that fight. But for me, Mikey Garcia is in a very strange position. Mikey Garcia will either, he's one of those strange builds. He's not the tallest of men, and he isn't the biggest of men. So he's not big enough for 147, as we saw when he went up to fight Errol Spence Jr. at 147. He's not big enough for that division. He's a little bit too big for 135. And he's just about right for 140. But to me, sometimes when I see him at 140, he looks a little bit too big for 140. So he's in that weird predicament for me. He's in a conundrum of the weight classes where he either has to stay where he's at and make the most of it, and maybe have 1 or 2 more fights and call it a day because he made a ton of money from the sport of boxing, or he takes another gamble and either goes up or comes down and see what he can do. But yeah, for me, Mikey Garcia and Adrian Broner are probably best suited at 140, but I just don't know where they go in their careers right now. So yeah, let's see what happens in 2022 for Adrian Broner and Mikey Garcia. As I mentioned, Shakur Stevenson had that big win against Jamel Herring, and then the big one with the trilogy fight between Tyson Fury and Deontay Bronze Bomber Wilder for the WBC heavyweight title fight, in which Fury sensationally did 11th round knockout of Deontay Wilder. Great fight. None of these two fighters have had their trilogy. Let's just put this fight between to bed. I don't think there definitely won't be a 4th fight between the two of them. Maybe a fight over Christmas dinner because they're apparently close friends. But yeah, Fury once again proved that he's a top fighter, definitely the top heavyweight in the world. And let's see what happens in next year. But we'll get to that in a minute. November, upset of the year. Let's get right into it. Upset of the year was Kambosos, who had a split decision over Teofimo Lopez for the WBO, WBA, and the IBF lightweight titles. I didn't think Teofimo Lopez would lose that fight, but Kambosos Jr. was up for that. Congrats to him. Came from down under in Australia, made all of Australia proud, and he just wanted it more. And that was a classic fight between a fighter who wants it more and someone who's slightly overconfident, and that was Teofimo Lopez. He won't fire his father. I think his father's a bit nuts, but there's something wrong with that training camp and that setup for me with Lopez. And I don't want to go too much into it, but I just don't think that they got it right for him at this moment in time. They need to reassess what the right setup for Lopez, and where does he go from here. Then there was a big one. The big one was Crawford versus Porter. 10th round TKO. Crawford stopped Porter for the WBO welterweight strap. I enjoyed all 10 rounds of that fight. A contender for fight of the year again. There was quite a few contenders for fights of the year. If you've heard me, if you listen to me in this segment so far, I've been really pleased with several fights of the year. But this can definitely be one of them. Very technical fight. It had a lot of drama. It was going backwards and forth. Some thought that Porter was in it. Some thought that Crawford wasn't in it enough. He was behind on some of the judges' scorecards earlier and midway through the fight. And then once he found another gear, it was just a different level. And there's levels to this stuff. And I just feel that Crawford is levels above a lot of welterweights. He probably is the top welterweight right now. I would say Crawford's 1 and Earl Spence Jr. is number 2, the top 2 welterweights of the division at the moment. So that was November. December ended with solid performance once again. So we started the year off pretty cool. It's pretty solid, and we ended the year pretty solid. We had Tank Davis had a very solid performance against Isaac the Bull Cruz, and that was by unanimous decision for the WBA lightweight title. Anthony Yarde had a solid performance in his rematch against Lyndon Arthur, 4th round TKO. That was a solid performance. Arthur Beterbiev. I did another video about this fight, up and coming fight between Marcus Brown for the IBF and the WBC light heavyweight title. Beterbiev just 9th round TKO. I think he just basically just did the business on this guy, man. I mean, Marcus Brown is no mug. He's no slouch. I did say and predicted in this particular fight that Marcus Brown would have to be busy and rely on his boxing skills and not get into a slugfest, because this guy Beterbiev is like, it's almost like watching Bam Bam of the Flintstones become a boxer. You know, it's like he's from the Stone Age, this guy Beterbiev. You hit him with a brick, he comes back with the bricks in his hands. And it's like his face is partially made of bricks. If he bleeds, then it's almost like, okay, he's even more dangerous when he bleeds. And when he got cut in that fight, it was by a looping right hand or overhand right by Marcus Brown. That made it worse for Marcus Brown because then that just woke the beast up. So impressive win for Beterbiev. And then we ended the year with the heavyweights, Joseph Parker versus Dirk Chisora 2 in a rematch. And that was a unanimous decision by Parker. Yes, it was a bravado performance by Dirk Chisora yet again. Some have said to me that Dirk Chisora is like the gatekeeper of the heavyweights. That may or may not be true, but I may or may not agree with that. But I will say this, that get your money, man. I mean, Dirk Chisora is obviously getting some good paydays. He hasn't, by my count, I believe he's lost the last 6 fights, but he's still getting decent paydays, big paydays. And I guess when you're at this age, it's part of your career, why not? I mean, he's obviously a millionaire, so he's made a lot of money from the sport of boxing. And I guess he's just topping up. He's just keeping his money going. And if he still feels like he's capable of getting in there and fight some of these big heavyweights, top heavyweights, and get a decent payday, he's probably thinking, why not? So who am I to say he should walk away from the sport of boxing? He should for health reasons, but he, in his own mind, he probably thinks, what am I going to stop? I stop boxing and do what exactly? So at this stage, if he can still get in there and mix it up with these guys, go 10, 12 rounds, then I guess he's probably going to think until someone puts me on my back, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to keep getting these $500,000, million, million and a half, 2 million paydays. Why not? So, yeah, fair play to him. I just hope he puts a lot of money away for his retirement fund and he can walk away from the sport of boxing with some scruples left. And that's my roundup of 2021. From top to bottom, from January to December. Some good fights in there. Replay this back so you can go over the fights that I mentioned and the fighters that I talked about, the decisions that I think that went rightfully or wrongfully. What does 2022 hold for some of the fighters that I mentioned? Well, we got some big fights coming up in 2022. Namely in January, pending the pandemic and lockdowns in the UK. We could be having Claressa Shields fighting in Cardiff. A big grudge match between Chris Eubanks Jr. and Liam Williams in Cardiff. If that fight does go ahead with the crowds, I hopefully will be at that fight in Cardiff, and hopefully that will be a great fight if it does go ahead. February should be a month where we would see, obviously, Josh Taylor fight and defend his belts in Scotland. Once again, it depends on the UK government and whether they allow fights to go ahead in the UK with crowds, or it could be behind closed doors without the crowds, which would be a shame for the boxers. Also in the month of January, we could possibly see the light heavyweight fight between Joe Smith Jr. and Callum Johnson, now of the UK. Now, the reason why this fight is particularly interesting, it'll be happening in the US, so that fight will probably go ahead. But that's big news for Anthony Yarde, who, as I mentioned earlier, beat Lyndon Arthur in the rematch, because that fight had such big significance, the Lyndon Arthur Anthony Yarde 2 fight, because the winner of that fight was promised the winner of the Joe Smith Jr. fight and the Callum Johnson fight. Now, in my opinion, I think Joe Smith Jr. wins that fight, in my opinion. And that would be a great opportunity for Anthony Yarde to win and that belt and become a world champion. I think Anthony Yarde can beat Joe Smith Jr. Joe Smith Jr., as you know, retired Bernard Hopkins at light heavy, and sensationally knocked Bernard Hopkins out the ring. And no one had ever heard of Joe Smith Jr. up until that point. He had a few successive wins after that, puts together a few strings of some very good wins. And now in the mix of this world title frame, that if he wins against Callum Johnson, and then obviously wins against Anthony Yarde, because that's probably who he's going to fight next, then his career is set up quite nicely. For Anthony Yarde, it'll be the second time fighting for a world title fight. And I would suspect that fight will probably be in America. Could be wrong, because Anthony Yarde is a big draw in the UK, or has become a bigger draw in the UK. But a lot of that depends on Frank Warren, what he can lock it in with the US promoters, whether they can bring the fight to the UK or stay in the United States. If it is in the United States, it'll be the second time that Anthony Yarde will fight for a world title on foreign soil. But Joe Smith Jr. is a lot different than Kovalev. Kovalev was a different animal. So this fight is set up very nicely for Anthony Yarde if he can get this fight with Joe Smith Jr. And if he fights Callum Johnson, then it will definitely be in the UK. So yeah, I think if Callum Johnson does win, I still believe that Anthony Yarde beats Callum Johnson. So either way, it's just a matter of how good or how bad either of those fighters look in their quest to become world champion. In 2022, we could be seeing a WBC fight between Dillian Whyte and Tyson Fury, if they can agree to purse. Apparently, Bob Arum is saying that Dillian Whyte's asked for crazy money, so that fight may not happen. And the WBC won't hold Tyson Fury to fight in his next fight with the WBC belt on the line. Don't ask me how that happens. And then therefore, Tyson Fury would just be allowed to fight for his lineal title, which isn't even a fucking title, but I don't know what they're talking about, or his Ring Magazine belt. Like, who gives a shit? So yeah, that whole thing is criminal if that fight doesn't go ahead, or if he's allowed to fight without having to defend his WBC strap. Then there's talk of Deontay Wilder coming back in 2022, possibly fighting Andy Ruiz Jr., Dillian Whyte. There's a few names being thrown out there. There's Anthony Joshua fighting a rematch against Alexander Usyk, which is going to be a very intriguing fight. That will probably be in the UK. And let's see what Anthony Joshua comes back and does in that fight. There's the Ugas versus Spence Jr. fight. And depending on what happened with that fight, then the winner of that fight should be fighting Terrence Crawford, if they can agree, because that's been going backwards and forth. I mean, there are various implications in the light heavyweight division, as I mentioned, between Anthony Yarde, Joe Smith Jr., and Callum Johnson. The cruiserweight division is heating up because obviously, you know, Lawrence Okolie wants to fight and unify the division. And the lightweight division is heating up because you got Ryan Garcia, you got Devin Haney, you got Gambosis, you got Teofimo Lopez, you got Tank Davis now. They're saying Tank Davis is probably going to fight Kambosos, when Kambosos had already talked preliminary about fighting Devin Haney, who's WBC champ. WBC are pulling some stunts with Devin Haney. It's all over the place. To me, the WBC is a mess. If Kambosos doesn't fight Devin Haney should probably move to another planet and probably become a world champion in another planet, because I don't know what the hell WBC is doing with him. But 2022 looks to be a very promising year. It looks to be an awesome year for the sport of boxing. I can't wait. Let's just thank all the fighters and the promoters who put on some great shows, some great fights, some great matchups in 2021. Let's look forward to 2022 being as exciting, if not more so. That's all I got for now. Support the channel. Hit the like, hit the bell icon, support the channel, leave your comments below whether you agree or disagree with some of the things I've said in this segment, and look forward for future podcasts and videos in the sport of boxing. I'm signing out here in Mauritius, the beautiful island of Mauritius, Boxstar Forum, Terry L. You know I'm doing it always. Support the channel. Let's keep it moving. One.